Hey everyone, welcome to today's lesson. One thing I want to cover is innovation lessons from history. I know it is a challenging time and a lot of people are trying to figure out how to adapt, not only in their work, but their organization and the people that they have around. And in this video, we're going to learn from history of innovation and especially during a recession. So if you don't know much about me, my name is Najeeb, founder of Council.Club. I've also written a book that's right over here based on innovation, looking at profitable innovation down in history. So we're going to first go through the three examples, and I'm going to share a bit more about what's been happening that you can use today. So starting first, we have to realize that this is a different situation, right? That 2 months ago, we did not even anticipate this was going to happen. A few people might have projected it, but for the most part, right now it's a different world. The streets are empty, shops are empty. It's a big change. And because of it, you want to realize that it is different. And it's okay because we can try and figure out how to move on to the next steps. So starting first, because this is a pandemic that's happening globally around the world, you want to realize that this is not the only pandemic. In fact, if you look at throughout history, there's been so many different pandemics, and over here you will see that the coronavirus, this was updated March 15th, so obviously it's a bit of a difference now. However, from before, much, or pardon me, from now to March 15th. So today is April 9th, huge difference. And at the same time, it is obviously an increase, a large increase in terms of the amount of casualties. So as you could see, based on history, there have been a lot of other plagues. And if you take a look at even more so, there is Black Death, smallpox, and Spanish flu, where millions of people have passed away. It's not to say one person's life is more important than the other. It's to understand that there have been other plagues and pandemics before that impacted us as a society. And because of it, there were a lot of opportunities for people who were able to kind of innovate their businesses and grow from it. It's not taking advantage of people, it's working with what you have. And for a lot of people who have currently been in the situation of trying to figure out, hey, I'm in the situation, my company's in the situation, what do I do next? This is where we start to take a look at. All right, now that we have said this, let's take a look at three examples, three recessions that have had in the past and how companies have come out of it. Fantastic companies, some that are still surviving today. Okay, so we're going to take a look at three different scenarios. One is 10 years ago, the second is in the 1980s, and the third is in the 1700s. These three are what we're going to take a look at, going all the way back first. So the first one is in 1721. This is in Boston. And in Boston, around 1721, they got hit by one of the worst smallpox epidemics. Because of it, half of the entire city's population was infected, and the death toll was about 850. Now, it's not as deadly as quite a few other places. However, because so many people are infected, they had to try and figure out a solution. And the only solution that seemed to work around that time is this concept called variolation. Variolation basically involves, because it's the smallpox, variolation involves taking a specimen from a pus of a lesion from an infected patient and inoculating it to a healthy person. And when they did that, they actually caused a mild infection. But that also helped make sure the patient did not get the full smallpox. And because this was somewhat novel at the time, they were trying to figure out a solution. There was a lot of debate. There was heavy debate on both sides. And a lot of people pushed back based on perhaps moral grounds or religious, and it created a lot of stir. Around that time, James Franklin, Benjamin Franklin's brother, he wanted to share his opinions, and he was against inoculation. And he wanted to do that in a newspaper. And he wanted to spread it out to a lot of other people. And because of this, this opinion paper became a forum for debate. Soon enough, there were stories about politics, events, about comedy, and it became one of the first independent newspaper in the US, which became the New England Current. This smallpox epidemic led to the rise of the New England Current, a new industry, and at the same time, it eventually helped in the subsequent decade for Edward Jenner to introduce the first smallpox vaccine. So as you can see, this is how one innovation in history, one recession, pandemic, impacted the innovation of and birthing of a new industry. So that is number one. Number two was in the 1980s. So 1980s, around that time, there was a huge recession that was going on, and it was the deepest since a post-war period. And it would also continue for the next 5 years. As you can see over here, this is the US GDP growth in the early 1980s. Some countries had a lot, some countries had a little. In some states in the US, unemployment went from 5 to 20% within a few years. This impacted a lot. And around that time, when this recession was happening, at a company called Xerox, which is still alive today, there were two employees, John and Charles. They were trying to figure out a programming language to help figure out the exact position, shape, and size of objects of a computer-generated page. So in this case, whatever you're looking at right over here on the screen, they're trying to figure out what is the exact position. And based on that, they were able to come up a language which is now later known as PostScript. However, the one thing is they needed a device and language capable of generating this page. And when Xerox declined to bring this technology to the market, John and Charles decided to form their own company and make it up. They were able to name it after a creek near their home, and that creek and that company is called Adobe. You probably know Adobe now as makers of Photoshop, Premiere Pro, and a lot of other software. They have over 22,000 employees and valued at over $150 billion as of today. This is how one opportunity in the recession time allowed them to create something that eventually became what we know as Adobe. That's number two. Number three, this is 10 years ago. 10 years ago, around the 2007 to 2009, there was a recession. Now, if you're probably working today, you're most likely alive by then, and you're working then. And if that's the case, you probably know that it was a recession that impacted countries around the world. And it was led because of financial regulation, corporate risks, subprime mortgages, and other policies. While it impacted certain countries more than others, it had lasting effects down the line. And around that time, a lot of companies were letting go employees. So around that time, Ben, Paul, and Evan came together to work on an idea. Ben left Google around that time. And he was trying to figure out how can he build something that he really loves based on things he collects. So they came together and they asked, what's the one thing that really matters? And build that. They built a simple site. That site itself allowed them to look at where is their opportunity and how can they share with others. Initially, they struggled, but eventually they were able to find the thing that really matters is design and sharing. And they used that and they doubled down on it to help create what we know as Pinterest. Now, that was only 10 years ago. Around today, 10 years later, in 2019, it filed for IPO and it was valued at $12 billion. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, so these are companies that were somewhat established, but what are the lessons? Well, in this video, we're going to talk about the lessons that you can actually learn from the past recessions in history. Number one, adapt to the new normal. It is no surprise that what's we're living in and through right now is much different than what we lived through before. And at the same time, because of this, you have to realize that this is the new normal. People are going to be working from home. People are going to be living at home, not going to be moving out for at least the next foreseeable future. If that's the case, how are you going to adapt? You want to understand that this is how it is, and you want to figure out how can you adapt to the new normal. And part of what that means is recognizing where there is opportunity and go after that. So for example, James Franklin, he was able to find out where there was paper, how can I spread information, and he did that. Similarly, for the Adobe, when that was created, they were able to figure out, hey, there's the opportunity to kind of create this. I'm going to push this out. At the same time, that's not enough, because when Ben tried to figure out just how to push out Pinterest at that time, he needed to find out what was the true value of his product and service. In this case, you're going to take a look at not only what is the white space, but also where is there the true value of your product. So if you're a restaurant, how can you serve that? If you are in a marketing agency, how do you kind of create the true value of what your customers need right now? If you are in accounting, what do the customers need right now, and how do you give that to them? So you do this by finding the white space. And once you do, you can unlock the hidden opportunities right now. And if you do this right, you can properly pivot. So those are the 3 different ways of how you can learn from this. And as you learn through these community, you can figure out, hey, I am going to improve this. And at the same time, I'm going to learn how to adapt based on the situation. Now that you know how to improve and get some feedback, so here are some of the next steps and resources that could help. First, if you want a free book, so I wrote a book based on innovating for these times. And this is published based on history. What has been effective to be profitable at this time? If you want a free copy of my book, just put book in the comments below. Second, if you want to join a community, if you want to join a free community of business leaders, managers, leaders who are trying to figure this out, and how are they working together and supporting each other to help figure out this next steps as they're working remotely, head on over to Council.Club. 3, if you want a free video on how to take action, what to do right now to adapt in the situation, how to improve your profit, then head on over to Council.Club and just type in adapt. Third, help. If you want more help, reach out to me via Council.Club and just say, hey, I just need some help. And because we're creating this program, bring a few people together. And if you want more details, happy to get that for you. So those are a few things what you can do. And remember that as you're trying to figure out these few steps of how to improve your business, your organization, take a look at history, learning from it, and growing. Hope that was helpful. If you found this valuable, definitely feel free to like and subscribe, or even share with other business owners, especially local business owners, as we're trying to help more people be aware of history and how they can adapt for the future.